For a lot of people, Mega Evolution is an all-time favorite feature, myself included. In fact, some of the Pokemon that I love, like Mawile or Beedrill, directly stem from how much I enjoy their Megas. So I know a lot of people were excited when Game Freak flashed this at the end of the Legends ZA announcement. Personally, I'm excited to see some of my favorite Mega Pokemon back and more rendered than ever, but I think what I'm looking forward to a little bit more is the possibility of new Mega Pokemon. There are currently 46 Pokemon with Mega Evolutions, 28 of them coming from XY and 18 of them coming from ORAS. That's not counting Mewtwo and Charizard have 2 different forms, but that's also not counting Latios and Latios basically being the same thing. With the current amount we have, I could see them adding about 14 new Megas, a bit less than the other games, but it would bring us to an easy and clean 60 Pokemon. See, one of the things I love about Mega Pokemon is the ability to go back and fix issues with already existing Pokemon. So like in cases like Mawile or Beedrill, it was a way to make a Pokemon that weren't used that much a bit better and more fun to use. And looking at some other Pokemon like Houndoom or Steelix, pushing their designs just a little bit further. Now I will admit, some parts of Mega Evolution were just a bit annoying, like giving already broken legendary Pokemon even more broken forms, or taking a Pokemon that was alright like Lucario and Kangaskhan and making them absolute terrors to fight against. With that being said, I still want more. And the Pokemon in today's video are going to be kind of pushed towards themes. And the first one is Pokemon that I think are the most likely. And if we're getting new Mega forms, the one I think is most likely is Flygon. Flygon by itself is nothing too crazy in all honesty. It's a cool Pokemon, but that's really all it is. Its stats are nothing special, especially if you compare it to any pseudo-legendary. And you know what's even worse? Just one generation after it came out, Garchomp was released, really making the difference even more drastic. Not to mention the ability Levitate doesn't help me in nearly as much as you would think. Even fan games like Pokemon Insurgents have Mega Flygon, so it does make you think, why didn't we get one? And the answer to that is Artist's Block. But we can still turn to the Mega from Insurgents to see what we could have had. You could have also fixed the strength issue by putting those extra 100 points partially into attack and then redistributing a little bit. I also think most people would enjoy it being a bug dragon type, and I think it would be a great idea to replace Levitate with Earth Eater, to give it the immunity while also giving it a bit more of a throwback to its normal ground typing as well as Trampinch burrowing around. A Pokemon I think would be a really good fit for a Mega is actually Milotic, partially because in my mind it's a counterpart to Gyarados, and the best way to honor that counterpart aspect is to make Milotic a Water Fairy type, with updated stats aiming at increasing its defenses. Ability wise, it would make the most sense to lock it into Cute Charm to embrace that new Fairy typing as well as nerfing it because Marvel Scale would be too good with the Mega form. Maybe you would also want to update its move pool with 1 or 2 Fairy moves, but it honestly already has a good bit. This one is a good fit for a Mega, and we're also going to make this one pretty strong. Why, you ask? Because we're talking about Spiritomb. Not only is this Pokemon a pain to obtain in every game it's ever been in, but it's also an extremely popular Pokemon despite not being that great compared to other ghost types. First and foremost, you have to change its type and ability. I think Rock and Ghost typing would make a really good addition to this Pokemon, especially because I think any good Mega should make good use of the Keystone. Honestly, when I was looking around, I couldn't find any good Spiritomb designs that fit my description, and I'm not good at art. So I'm going to take the Mega Spiritomb from Insurgents and add a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and boom, perfect Pokemon design. Moving on to its ability, I think it could make great use of Prankster with its good support and setup move pool. We're also going to add a little bit of bulk when we do the stats, and we're going to dump a little bit into its defense and speed, but not enough to make it broken because it's similar to normal Spiritomb. It's going to be a bulky mixed attacker with access to priority. Magnezone is a Pokemon that feels like we should have got something. It just feels like it needs a little bit more, both design and gameplay wise. In Black and White 2, there's dex entries that say a group of scientists trying to find a way to make it evolve again, but failed. So to that I say, what if they didn't fail? I think it would be a great first step to make its ability Levitate, getting rid of that 4 times ground weakness, and then giving it some stat buffs all around, making it a special attacking wall, with a bit of a bump into speed to try to give it a chance of outspeeding, but not quite fast enough to let it outspeed Scarfmons. Last in this group is Falinks, and I'll be the first to admit that this is the least likely one so far on this list, but I know people would love it if he got a Mega. I also think the ability Simple would be great for him, and it would make No Retreat essentially a Geomancy that he can't switch out of. On the other hand though, it would mean if he used more than one close combat, he'd be extremely vulnerable to anything that comes out. On to stats, we're gonna buff it a little bit all around, and design wise, I don't fully know what would be good for it. All I know is that I want to keep it as a little group of fellas, because that's a huge part of its identity. I found something that somebody made as an evolution for Falinks, but I think it works just as well for a mega form. This next group of Pokemon are Pokemon that are in desperate need of some help. And I know not every Pokemon has to be good, but it's really a shame how useless some of these Pokemon are. For example, Dusknoir. And this Pokemon isn't necessarily horrible. In fact, it's not even as bad as some of the other Pokemon in this section, but it does get outshined simply by its pre-evolution holding an Eviolite. To make sure that's no longer the case, I ran some numbers to make sure that this thing would be more bulky than Eviolite Dusclops, but not that much better, only enough to make it valid to use. I also lowered its base speed to make it even scarier in Trick Room, and I think the ability Shadow Tag would help it be more of a problem for people not planning to fight it. Speaking of fighting, I think Fighting type would be a great addition, especially if we gave it something like Drain Punch to give him a little bit of extra recovery. It could also be a really cool mon to add on to defensive Perish Trap teams. Gen 9 had a weird issue when it came to a lot of Pokemon, and I just felt like they weren't quite finished. A lot of them felt like mid-stage Pokemon, and nothing showed that off quite like Spidops. Truthfully, I also want to mention that they might not touch it in this new game because it's so new, but the Pokemon needs something. With weak stats and a weak design, there's really nothing going for it, so Omega could be just what it needs. Its stats make it seem like somewhat of a slow, bulky support mon. What if we said no and made it fast and offensive, while still having supporting capabilities with stuff like Sticky Web, Spikes, and Knockoff? I also think adding the normal type would make sense as well. In the long run, I don't know how much it would actually help, but I think Spidops would like a secondary typing, and giving it a ghost immunity would probably help it a little bit. I would also give it an ability, something like Huge Power, because its stats are so low naturally that giving it a meaningful boost through stats alone would be very hard. Spidops would definitely be hard to work on because its base design doesn't give you much starting off of, and its stats in its Mega form would still be lower than most of these other Pokemon's starting points. Froslass feels like a Pokemon that really had wasted potential, and I think in a world where Froslass got a Mega instead of Glalie, it would have been a lot better, not just because it's more consistent, but because its typing and general idea already made it feel like it could be a fast and scary threat. With that being said, we're going to raise its speed and special attack both to 135, same as Fluttermane, and we're going to level out a lot of its other stats, making it a fast special attacker with strong stab types and good offensive power. I also think it'd be cool to keep its ability as Snowcloak, giving us a Mega that you want to run in a snow team. It would also get the defense boost from the snow, and giving it a chance to dodge just helps ensure this thing is living as long as it can. Sunflora is a lot like Spidops, and what I mean by that is that it was simply let down by its home generation. We're going to change its typing to Grass Fire, and that might sound a bit weird, but if we slap on the ability Drought, I think it could really put in some work. We're going to give it a similar spread to the one we gave Froslass to help make sure it's able to outspeed a lot and challenge Pokemon back, especially with its new stab moves coming off of a Sun Boost. For example, you could run everything from Weather Ball to Heat Wave to Flamethrower off of this thing. Not to mention enabling itself for single turn solar beams that can one-shot enemies as well is really strong. Before I move on to my last group of Pokemon, I want to say some honorable mentions, because these Pokemon were all very likely, but I didn't think they made sense to put them on the list for one reason or another. First up, we have the original Gen 6 starters. In a video a few weeks ago, I actually talked about the fact that I think it'd be a great idea to make them have new Megas and be the starters of ZA. But I think whether they're the starters for the game or not, there's still a really high chance they would get Mega forms because of how tied to the region they are. For the same reason, I think the legendaries might get new forms, specifically Xerneas and Yveltal, because Zygarde already has 3 different forms that can kind of turn into each other, so it would be a lot going on for that mon. A few Pokemon actually almost made it on this list, but I ended up scrapping them. And the Pokemon were Aegislash, Furfrou, and Goodra. Furfrou and Aegislash actually have a very similar reason behind them for not making it on here. I think it'd be too weird to make Megas a Pokemon that either have multiple forms like Furfrou, or a Pokemon that is known for changing forms mid-battle like Aegislash. The best way to do it would just be to give Aegislash a new ability, something like Sharpness, but I think that it's losing a bit of its identity. Goodra is kind of the perfect fit for a Mega Pokemon, and that probably has you sitting here thinking, well, why is it in the honorable mentions then? And that's because in the last Legend game, it actually got a new form. I don't know how they would feel about giving it a form in the last game and giving it a new Mega, essentially just another form in this game. But it's also widely known to be one of the worst pseudo Pokemon around, so I think it would be a great fit for it. Every other game that has added a gimmick made sure to include Pokemon from their own region. You had Pokemon like Mimikyu and Kommo-o getting their own Z moves, Pokemon like Orbeetle or Hatterene getting their own Gigantamax forms, and even Ogerpon and Terapagos getting special Terra forms in Scarlet and Violet. But Gen 6 was the game that brought us battle gimmicks, and yet no Pokemon from Gen 6 were given a Mega. So the last section of this video is going to be 5 Pokemon that are all from Gen 6. First up we have Noivern, and this is the perfect example to make a good Mega Pokemon. It's already strong, but not quite too strong, and it's got a cool design, but it feels like you could spruce it up a little bit. And it also has just the right amount of love. I know a lot of people love this Pokemon, myself included, and I think a lot of it for me had to do with still being young enough to watch the anime, and getting to see it as the first new Gen 6 Pokemon. I think giving it the ability soundproof thematically makes sense for it, and then when it comes to the design, I think amplifying the sound themes is going to be a really good idea. Stat-wise, I think we should take what it already does well and amplify that a little bit. So boosting up its speed and special attack while still buffing up the rest of its stats just a healthy bit. Hawlucha is a Pokemon that's really cool for a one-stage Mon, and it also has a really cool typing and signature move. I think it would be a fast, hard hitter with decent enough bulk to take a few hits. You also definitely want to make this Pokemon fast enough so that the Unburden set doesn't just blitz it past it. With that being said, I think something like this stat spread would be really good for it. However, I think the Unburden one would still outspeed by a kind of a landslide, but I'm not going to make it base 200 or anything. We already took our liberties with Dusknoir. Heliolisk is a lot like Sunflora, where it seems to have a really strong sun theming to it. I'm going to replace its normal typing with fire typing, as well as keeping solar power as its ability. We're also going to raise its speed up to make it a worthy alternative to Mega Houndoom, although it's not like that Pokemon is winning any contests. Giving it 125 in speed makes it that it can outspeed Houndoom and challenge it in 1v1s, especially Sun 1v1s. With that being said, by default, its speed and special attack match each other, so we might as well do that with the Mega as well. Then we're going to give it a pretty even spread all the way around that's similar to the spread it already has. Malamar is a Pokemon with one of the most unique evolution methods of any Pokemon ever, and that's one of the things that actually makes me love it. Well, that and Contrary. Yes, we are keeping Contrary on the Mega as well, especially since the thing you see this doing most is spamming Superpower. We're going to give it a bulky, physically focused spread with 115 in its attack, defense, as well as special defense. Then we're going to make it somewhat slow, but not slow enough to take advantage of Trick Room, and then tossing some in special attack so we're not too min-maxed on this one. Last but not least, we have Pyroar, and this was kind of a missed opportunity. How much more sense would it have made for Lysander to have a Mega Pyroar instead of Gyarados? I mean, it's literally the Pokemon that feels like it was made for him. I will also say, I know I said the thing about Furfrou, and this also has 2 forms, but we're just gonna roll with it, okay? Pyroar is normally a special attacker, but with that being said, it makes most sense to make it a Sun Abuser in that case, and I've already done that twice in this video. Not to mention we have Charizard Y and Houndoom, so it would feel a bit dumb to just have 5 or 6 Megas all with Sun Abusers. What we're gonna do instead is make it have its normal hidden ability Moxie, and we're gonna make it a mixed attacker, raising its speed and special attack to both 125, while also giving it a 115 in its attack stat, making it so that after 1 Moxie, it can run away with a game. It would probably be able to do some cool stuff like Overheat, take a kill, and then run away with its physical move pool. Just imagine having to go against that. We'll round it out a little bit everywhere, and it's still going to have lackluster defenses, making it a fast, dangerous Mon, but still having its own weaknesses. I'm sure there's tons of other Pokemon I glossed over while making this video. So honestly, if you're hyped for Mega Evolution like I am, let me know what Pokemon you would want to see get a Mega in the future, because it would be awesome to have a discussion about it in the comments. This was also a really fun video to make, and if you made it all the way to the end, I would greatly appreciate a like, and if you enjoyed it enough to see what else I do in the future, consider subscribing, especially because I'm a very small creator and every subscriber means the world to me. I also want to mention that there will be a link to every artist in the description, but I also couldn't find the original artist for some of these, so if you are them / know who they are, please put it in the comments so these amazing people can get their credit. With that being said, I'm gonna head out, but if you want to hear me talk about Legends ZA and everything else related to Pokemon Future, I would highly recommend checking out the video on the end card.